Two things I want to start off with. I've got a few minutes to speak, but I hope this will be the starting point of some conversations with colleagues here and with you. I'm very privileged to be here in front of you. Thank you very much to We Are Museums. The second point is, despite me talking about mindfulness and how we practice this at Manchester Art Gallery, I stand in front of you in a certain amount of unease. And I do that because, of course, culture exists in a political sphere, and Britain at the moment is on the verge of taking a political direction. I don't want to mention the name, which you're all familiar with, because I might start swearing. But if any of you want to talk to me later after a glass of wine, I might well start swearing then. However, being here representing a British cultural organisation, without wanting to speak too far, but having talked to colleagues in Britain, British cultural organisations desperately want to stay connected to you. Ours is not the choice of isolationism. We have prospered our thinking and our practices in connection with you, and we dearly want that to continue. So please bear that in mind over the next few months. Heavens knows what's going to happen. Thank you. That really means a lot, because, and this does link to my presentation, it's part of it, but I think cultural organisations, and polarisation isn't just happening in Britain either, I guess, but cultural organisations, I think, have a unique role at the moment, because society, not just in Britain, not just in Europe, but throughout the world, I think is becoming more polarised. And I think that creates a certain amount of stress in society. And I think cultural organisations have a trusted role and have an ability not to be a cure-all for that stress, but definitely to play a role. And that's what I wish to talk to you a little bit about. Something that's very much publicised in the media of Britain at the moment is stress levels. It's now talked about as the new major cause of people taking time off work. I think 5 or 6 years ago it was back pain. Everyone was talking about back pain. Now stress is coming up again. Stress in young people is also a major factor. There have been, and I don't think this is just in Britain, there have been suicides of young people linked, not caused by, but linked to social media. Knife crime is on the rise. Not necessarily linked to social media, but information is traveling quicker, attitudes are forming, angry attitudes are forming, and they're going out and they're being mainstreamed, causing other angry attitudes. So I think there is a real issue about polarisation and the speed at which things happen. At Manchester Art Gallery, we've been trialling for a few years now stress-busting programs. And some of these are around about events, small events that happen a few times a month. The one that we're looking at now is called Mindful Marks, where you come into the gallery, there's music playing, you look at artworks, and you make marks. And you spend a bit of time unwinding because of that. We have another one called Take Notice, where you sit in front of a painting, and with someone leading the way, you slow down and reflect, and let yourself go into the painting, notice the detail, and then pull back again. And that allows the mind and the body to relax and slow down and take a bit of time and reflect, something that I think is under pressure at the moment. Building on from that, we thought, well, how do we spread that out further? How do we embed that in the organisation? Because unless you came to a Take Notice session or Mindful Mark session, you might not be aware of any of this happening in the gallery at all. So we set up a gallery space called And Breathe. And that's what it was all about. It was about breathing and sitting. We introduced armchairs and a sofa. We had only 9 artworks in the room and no interpretation. We had labels, small labels you had to find to look at, and we hung the pictures low so people could sit down and relax and breathe. There it is. That's an example of the space. Meant to be more tranquil. There's a sofa in another section. There's an app you can download on your smartphone that guides you through so you can get a bit of the experience. We haven't tested it. We've picked up a lot of feedback. We haven't run research into it, and perhaps that is a weakness or something that we need to do. We've been running this since about last February, I think, and we're going to continue on further with it, maybe changing around some of the artworks. One of the things we have noticed, and we did a little bit of study before we tried this experiment, there is a study that shows that in a busy art gallery, people spend about 17 seconds looking at a painting. We've got 9 works of art in this space. So if you were to do the clunky maths, and this is a little bit simplistic, but 19 by 17 comes in at about 2.5 minutes. We have found from observing the space and surveying it that less than 5% spend 3 minutes in the space. More than 18.5% spend half an hour. 15% spend 1 hour or more, and 29% lost track of time. Some of my colleagues who work on the floor have also mentioned to me that they've noticed quite a few people falling asleep in the space. I actually think that's not a bad thing, because if you fall asleep, you have to feel safe and relaxed, and if you wake up feeling refreshed, well, that's okay. But it is something that we want to test a little bit further, and as I say, it's a weakness in that we haven't done any really academic research or an inquiry into it. How long we retain this space as a complete And Breathe space, I'm not quite sure. At the moment, it's scheduled through to next November. What I might do after this is see if we can put And Breathe zones around the gallery. So rather than just having it in one space, it's spread out maybe in a few different zones about the place. But I want to experiment because I'm not quite sure what will work better. What I would say, and if some of you are interested in trying out this technique, it is actually fairly low cost. We can do most of it in-house. It's painting the walls a friendly color, dropping the paintings, putting in some furniture is really the core at it. We do find kind of naming it as the And Breathe space so that people are doing it more deliberately does help. And I know I titled this presentation Towards the Mindful Museum. Even thinking about it when I was traveling here, I'm not too sure how far I'd want to go to being a complete mindful museum. Because life is about balance. It's about justifiably feeling sad when we need to feel sad. There might be some areas where mindfulness isn't appropriate and doesn't work. I think having a mindful component in a museum and it embedded in practice is perhaps to have it as an option. So people can chance upon it or deliberately go there and create their own form of mindfulness. I definitely think, just from Manchester Art Gallery's point of view, that it has really done something quite special for us. And there is a recurrence of people coming back to do this with us. But I also think that it's important to do other things in spaces. I'm keen on the idea of there being a balance, that we develop our own coping strategies, because of course we've got to look at people's lives and look at our own lives in a holistic way. You come into a gallery and be stressed one moment, go out, get your pocket picked, and be mega stressed next. But I think it's important in life to have the coping strategies that when things do go a bit out of kilter, we can pull back and reflect and regain our strength again. Because as my colleague, my team member who runs with this practice back in Manchester always says to me, people talk about bad mental health. Maybe it's just mental health. If you are unfit and overweight and go to a doctor would tell you probably take more exercise. If you have a mental illness and go to a doctor, I think it's changing now, but traditionally you would be prescribed an antidepressant. Is there not space for being prescribed, and there is social prescription that's beginning to happen now, of doing something that is going to be stress relieving but might not involve a drug? And I think there is that movement beginning to grow now where there are different things that can be done. So I suggest maybe if some of you are interested in talking to me about it or experimenting with it, there is a room in galleries and museums to have this element of not just thinking of bad mental health, but thinking just of mental health. And there are ways, simple ways that we can do that helps improve that or contribute to it. Thank you very much. Dziękuję. So I suggest maybe if some of you are interested in talking, dziękuję.